Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be reviewing the Big Finish audio story Stormfront with the 8th Doctor. And I do believe this was the first 8th Doctor Big Finish audio, I think. I'm not 100% certain, but I think. I know the cover, it does look like, TV movie 8th Doctor. So I think this is the first one though. It's a bit of a roller coaster, actually. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from this. My thoughts on it varied depending on where I was in the story. Like when it first started, I've talked before about how Big Finish is very hit or miss with me, and sometimes I struggle to get into it. When it first started, it took me a while to connect with it. It was partway through episode 1, I did start warming up to it, but especially at the beginning, because I had no idea what's going on when the Doctor's talking about being in the time ship and the one ship being in the time thing. I had no idea. It just threw me right down in the middle of something. I'm like, bing? And then I picked up quickly is the 8th Doctor just talking to himself? Because I guess he's having to, give exposition of what's going on, and that's really the only way to do it since it's a completely audio story. It's just weird for a character to be talking to himself like that. But then he actually mentions, talking to myself again, I gotta stop doing that. And you wouldn't think such a little thing would work, but it does. Like, as soon as he said that, I was fine with it the rest of the story anytime he does it. Because I like to think this is the 8th Doctor when he's still kind of new to his 8th Doctor body, his 8th Doctor life. So he's still kind of figuring himself out. And for some reason, just that little line there, it worked for me. I was fine with it. I liked episode 1 got good once he got on the airship and he met Charlie. They have a really good rapport together. Paul McGann and the actress doing Charlie seem like they get on well together. So I did like how quickly they seem to start kind of clicking together. Now, I was not familiar with the R101. Again, I'm in the States, so I don't know all of the British history stuff. More familiar with like the Hindenburg. Like, I honestly didn't realize this was a historical event. I thought they were in the future, and the R101 was like some kind of rocket ship or spaceship, luxury cruiser in space. Something like in Terror of the Vervoids. I didn't realize what it was until he's talking to Charlie, and he's like, is this October the 4th, 1930? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, this is in the past. And he goes, and this is the R101? She's like, yes. He's like, ooh. Because he knows it's going to crash. So I paused it and started doing some searching online. And sure enough, I read the Wikipedia article about the R101 and learned about its history and what happened. And the fact most of the people died. And it's one thing the story doesn't get right. The story says everybody died in it. Apparently like 6 people out of the 54 people actually survived. But that was interesting. It was nice to learn that. So I did learn an actual historical fact from this story. So that's pretty interesting. And then once I realized that this was set in the 1930s, it's and it's a fictional take on a historical event, I was able to mentally change my mental picture of what's happening in my head, because I always roll a movie in my head as I'm listening to Big Finish audio or I'm reading a novel. Charlie's interesting because I believe Charlie's the one that also travels with the 6th Doctor later, because I think she's in one of the Last Adventure stories. Like, she travels with the 8th Doctor, and then he leaves her somewhere, and the TARDIS disappears, and when it reappears, she's like, oh, he came back. And she goes in, and it's the 6th Doctor. Although why the 6th Doctor, since the 6th Doctor travels with her, you'd think the 8th Doctor would recognize her, but I'm sure there's a timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly explanation for that. Especially since Charlie isn't supposed to be alive anyway. But I liked episode 1. I liked episode 2 a lot. I almost did a review after I finished part 2. But I decided to finish the story instead. Part 2 was really good. I was really high on the story at that point. I was really enjoying it. I love the stuff with like the time pterodactyl or whatever it is. I liked meeting Rathbone and finding out how not a good person he was, and the person they have in cabin 43, wondering what's going on with that. Catching on pretty quickly. It's probably some kind of alien. I was not expecting the cliffhanger. We're getting into spoilers. The cliffhanger of, them meeting a mothership, 1930s Britain coming into contact with a mothership. Episode 3 is where it got problematic. Episode 3 is a slog to get through. It is very boring, or part 3, whatever you want to call it. It's so boring. because there's just a lot of talking going on. Nothing's really happening. This is pretty much when the Doctor and Lord Tomalin, or whatever his name is, and one or two other people are talking with the aliens. And the alien voices are a little bothersome to me. I mean, at least I can tell which one is which when they're talking, because they do the pitch differently. And it's an audio story, so you kind of have to do something with the voice to make it interesting, but it doesn't quite work for me. And it's just a lot of talking, and it's so boring. The cliffhanger is all right. Part 4 starts out a little because it's just kind of picking up where 3 left off with some talking, but it gets good really quick. And matter of fact, they wrap up the stuff on the alien ship pretty fast, faster than I thought they would. And most of episode 4 takes place back on the airship as we end up in the situation of how history takes the course it has to take and how the R101 crashes. And that part's awesome. I like the part right when we figure out the Lord Tomalin, I can't remember his name, I'm going to call him Tomalin. Tomalin, when he actually turns out to be a pretty decent guy and he stays behind to help the aliens. That's pretty cool, and I'll touch on that later. Everything going on there is pretty neat. And then the stuff on the R101, when you find out, Rathbone bought one of the alien weapons back, and the Doctor's like, no, y'all can't have that. That'll alter the web of time. And the Doctor basically grabs it and runs off with it, and then everybody's after him, and then the time pterodactyl thing wakes up, and it's running around. It's a really good final episode. I really like that. And with a really good ending that makes you want to watch the next one, because finding out, Charlie is an enigma. She's kind of a time thing that isn't supposed to exist, kind of like Jackie is. Talking about characters, Paul McGann is really good in this. I love in part 4 when he gets a couple of those moments where he really gets to be a tour de force of acting. I've always talked about my favorite 8th Doctor moment is in the TV movie when he's chained up and he's having that confrontation with the Master and he's getting loud, Lee, this is my TARDIS, this is my body, he's lying, all of that. I love that. I love when the 8th Doctor really gets going. And he gets that here, right when in part 4 when he's talking to him about the gun. He's like, no, y'all need to listen to me. Do you know about the web of time? And I can't remember everything he says, but he just lays it out, and the way McGann does that is great. And then later when he confronts Rathbone, when he's got Rathbone's got the axe there at the kind of compartments where all the airbags are in the ship. Again, the way he does that performance there, I absolutely loved that. I like Charlie a lot. Again, I've heard her in one of the 6th Doctor stories. She's good here. She's just kind of this young girl who wants to go out and see the world, have adventure, explore. Perfect for the Doctor, especially the 8th Doctor. I like the guy who plays like Lord Tomalin or whatever his name is. Because he most of the story you don't think he's a really good guy. He's kind of one of those guys. You're like, oh, one of those guys, because he's talking about throwing the Doctor overboard and the mission comes first. That's all that matters. And if you weren't a spy, I'd have to throw you overboard. But we'll put you in a prison or have you shot later. He doesn't strike me as a very good guy most of the story. But then in part 4, he turns pretty cool, actually. You find out one of the reasons he's like that is he's fought in other wars. He's seen misery, and it's kind of made it to where he doesn't want that to happen again. So he's trying to do what's best for the British Empire. He's a very much a for king, for country type person. And then when they offer him to be the new lawgiver, he basically says yes but no and says, I'll be an advisor instead. I don't have many years left, and even though I know I can't come back here, I'll go with you. He actually turns out to be a pretty good guy. And I didn't see that coming because most of the story is just kind of a prick. And you realize it's more just his personality, the for king, for country thing. So I love that he turned out to be a pretty nice guy. The Rathbone, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm just going to call him Rathbone. Y'all know who I mean. When you find out he's being kind of mentally controlled, I kind of figured, well, maybe he wasn't such a bad guy. But in part 4, when he's free of the control, he still turns out to be a bad guy. The guy voicing him does a good job, though. I like some of the voice work. It was always very easy for me to tell which character was talking, for the most part. They all do a pretty good distinctive performance, and that's really appreciated. I thought the guy doing Tumulon might have been Colin Baker at first, because at the beginning of the episode, I swear he sounded like Colin Baker. I was like, did they sneak Colin Baker in this? As the story went on, I changed my mind. I figured it was somebody else. But there was a moment I was like, did they? The guy playing the flight lieutenant, it's interesting because he seems like a pretty good guy most of the story. And then at the end, he's kind of willing to go along with no, we need to keep the weapon. Not necessarily that he's a bad guy. He strikes me as a pretty good guy. Just another one of those stiff upper lip, it's the 1930s, British for the Britons, Britain for the Brits and all that. We have to do what we can to shore up our defenses because I'm British. And, it ends up causing the ship to crash because of the events that played out that. I like his kind of thing at the end when they did, well, we got a wine bottle left. Here's to you, fellows. And they know they're going to die, so they handle in that, old school British stiff upper lip, it is what it is fashion. I did enjoy a lot of that. And then the doctor realizing Charlie should have died in that and wondering what the ramifications could be that she lived when she's not supposed to, and how he talks about how it can cause a time storm somewhere. And I do believe there is a story later called Time Storm that is an effect of the events that happen here. And that could be where he loses Charlie. I don't remember. Because I know something happens to Charlie and that very much changes the Eighth Doctor. I think that's why he becomes a little more bitter and darker like we see him in Night of the Doctor. Although she must somehow survive because the Sixth Doctor travels with her later. Timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. But I liked Time Storm. It's a roller coaster. It started out kind of here, and then it got really good, and then episode 3 is, so boring. And then episode 4 picked up and got good again, and it finished on a really high note. I mean, he got to ride like a time pterodactyl. I like when he says that. I told you I rode these things on Gallifrey. And it's just good performances all out. So I definitely liked it. It's definitely on the good side of my Big Finish stories, because Big Finish stories are very hit or miss with me. Like, I love Jubilee. I love The Last Adventure. All 4 stories in The Last Adventure, I love them. They're great. I really liked Stormfront. It's in that category, ones I like. But then you have others like Spare Parts. I didn't like Spare Parts. Spare Parts is so overrated. I didn't really get into it. The Light at the End was kind of... didn't really care for it. And I feel like there's one I'm forgetting that I didn't really care for too. And I'm slowly making my way through Unit Domination. It's been weird. My favorite part of it's been Alex McQueen, the other doctor who's I think is actually the master. He's my favorite part of it. It's been kind of, I'm slowly working my way through it. I've done parts 1 and 2. So I haven't quite decided where it falls yet. There's some weird stuff going on in that one. Floating baby heads. But I like Stormfront. It's definitely in the good category, despite a really rough episode 3. It's definitely in the good category. So I want to give a shout out to Unknown289. He did help me get a hold of this one so I could listen to it. So I certainly appreciate that. So Stormfront, have you listened to it? What do you think of it? Comment down below and let me know. Was this the first Big Finish story? The first 8th Doctor story? I think it was. Other things to do, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. That helps me out. We are over 900 subscribers now. I certainly appreciate that. My goal is to reach 1,000 this year. So if you haven't subscribed yet, click that little button for me. I certainly appreciate it. I also have a Patreon. If you would like to support me that way, that certainly does help me keep the bills paid, especially lately. Had to put a new throttle body on the car. That was fun. But there is a link to that down in the description below. Several different tiers there to choose from. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support as I do the support of all of my patrons. I also want to give a shout out to Alice. I haven't thanked Alice in a while. Alice is one of my mid-tier subscribers, and she's been with me for quite a while. Alice Collins, I believe. And she's been a member for quite a while. And I just wanted to give her a shout out as well because I appreciate her continued support. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you would like to send me to look at and review, and a link to my Amazon wish list is down there as well. Most importantly though, thank you for watching.